Hello, I'm Lourdes Keever. I'm co-opted member for the Diocese of Westminster.
Thank you, everyone. Mary, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Thank
and
you.
any
Hi.
other co-opted members who are joining us virtually, please introduce yourself after Councillor Mason.
Hello, everybody, and apologies for not being there in person, but I'm in a long COVID storm at the moment, so day 14 or something. I'm the councillor for Bounds Green, so hopefully I can join as well as I can virtually.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mary.
My name is Anita Jacku and I'm also a co-opted member.
Thank you, Anita. Anyone else from co-opted members joining us virtually?
Kanupriya will be joining us, but a little bit later. I know her meeting's running over.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. We'll note that. Thank you, everyone. Apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Buxton and Amanda Bernard.
Thank you for that, Rob. Declaration of interest. Can I ask members and the co-opted members if they have any declaration of interest they need to declare? No? Now we move to item 6, pages 1 to 8. Item 6 is the minutes of the meeting we held on 6th of September. Are we happy to approve the minutes? Agreed? Thank you, everyone. Our next item, item 7, it's our opportunity to ask Cabinet Member Councillor Zina Brabazon our questions. Councillor Brabazon will be briefly outlining key developments in her portfolio, and she's got 5 minutes time to do that. Then we have approximately like up to 25 minutes for question and answers. As I said, this is our opportunity for members and co-opted members to ask our lead member a question to do with children and young people's panel and in this area. Thank you. Zina, would you like to, start your briefing, then briefs?
Thank you, Chair. Right, I'm going to start with some really good news. You will know, I think, that Rowland Hill Nursery School got an outstanding Ofsted inspection, which means that all our 3 nursery schools in the borough are outstanding, which is an astonishing position to be in, given the fact that nursery education is what has been under such serious threat for many, many years, and the number of nursery schools in this country has declined. I think we have, I'm not sure if it's 385 or 395 left in the whole country. 2 were apparently closed in other places over the summer. I can't tell you, as members of the committee, what an amazing achievement it is for this borough, not just to have 3 outstanding, fantastic nursery schools, giving our youngest children the absolute best start in life, but we have 3 other outstanding provisions across our early years. The Willow is having a celebration event on Friday for its outstanding, for its 0s to 3s. Stonecroft Centre has been outstanding for a long time, and Woodside Children's Centre. And I wouldn't, of course, what I'm also telling you is that all of these are local authority provisions. If you include the Willow as a maintained nursery school with strong links with the Children's Centre, that is something I think that the local authority should truly celebrate. We know from if we didn't know before the pandemic, we ought to know now the importance of early years, early intervention, early language support, and all of those things that happen in these most amazing institutions. To add to that, of course, children with special needs have high priority in our nursery schools and are included and make fantastic progress. So that's one thing I would like to report to the committee, and I hope that everyone will share our pride. I know Anne's incredibly proud and her team. It cuts across early help, schools, children's social care. Rising Green Youth Hub. If the members haven't had a chance to visit, I'd all be very welcome. This was opened in July and is very popular, and is currently hosting the Wood Green Voices public consultation events. I was there today, but to have this centre in Wood Green for young people, which is open in the afternoons into the early evening, was open all over the summer. Again, I think we should be really pleased that we're opening provision at a time when there's such a lot of worry about money. And so that leads me on to Hazelmere Road. You have a report in your pack, so I won't go on about it, just to say that this is our first residential setting brought in-house. Again, we can see the trend. We move away from all this, the outsourcing, away from external commissioning, relying on the private sector or the independent sector, and running our own provision with stronger control, and bring young people back into borough. Social workers in schools. I don't know which members are familiar with the Social Workers in Schools programme. This started from the government's What Works innovation programme, I think, which has funded social workers in schools. I was visiting Greg City to talk to one of the social workers and the team on Friday. What a difference this programme is making, putting social care at the front line in our secondary schools. We are hoping to be able to expand this into all our secondaries, but of course the budget, but we think we can make a good progress with this in this coming financial year. I have to say, I think most of my Labour colleagues know this, of course, that if we had additional money, I would certainly like to see this programme rolled out into our primaries. I think bridging the gap between education, of like schools and social care, is a really, really important process to follow. We absolutely should do it. It makes an enormous difference to the schools, mostly to the families having the social worker on site. I can't emphasise that enough. Maya Angelou, I know Lottie came with me. We've been there. The Maya Angelou Contact Centre, which is family centre. I've forgotten its name, Mark. The family centre, where children that we look after in our care can have supervised contact with their birth families, and it's absolutely delightful centre. It's not austere, it's very pleasant, incredibly warm, caring team, and doing a terrific job. I suppose those are some of our highlights. You know about safety valve. I'm not sure if that's going to come up in your questioning, but we're making good progress with the DFE. They've agreed in principle, I think, our proposals. No doubt there'll be many more meetings. You'll know this is a programme we really have to participate in. And actually, as Cabinet member, I welcome the challenge that they throw at us to transform and move our SEND on. And in fact, we have made already very, very significant progress through the written statement of action, which has been given, I think, a good review so far on the work we've done. The Parent Carer Forum have been very complimentary. I'm sorry Amanda is not here tonight to praise them. They have now got well over 100 members, which is quite astonishing, that the Parent Carer Forum in the borough has grown and has become such a important voice for parents and families. So I don't know how my timing's doing, but let me take you to the SEND local offer. If you'll be familiar with that, I think vastly improved. The Special Educational Needs newsletter has now got circulation of over 2,000, readership of over 2,000, and gets bigger and bigger every month. I'm sure members on this committee read it. You'll see it's just an endless array of things going on, which are now being shared and conveyed to families. Our transport policy is out to final consultation. We didn't have one complaint in September about home to school transport, and anybody who has been through that, like me, I can tell you that was an amazing achievement. In terms of children's social care and child protection, I think our numbers are fairly stable. We're monitoring this all the time, and we are pretty much within the benchmarking where we should be for the children we look after. In later on this month, we were having the our looked after children in care, looked after children's event. So more of that, I think I'll be contacting you all. I'm not sure what else I can add. So I'll leave it there. I think that's a pretty good tour of the issues. You've got the summer programme report, so I don't need to tell you about that. And I think I'll leave it there so you can ask me questions for anything that I've missed.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Brotherson. Now we're gonna move to questions. We've got two written questions from a co-opted member, Amanda Burnett, who's not here with us tonight. So, sorry, two questions from one of our co-opted member, Anita, written questions. I will obviously ask on her behalf, but before I can ask, I know Councillor Mason has two questions, and I just want to see if anyone else, Lords, you have anyone else? Lottie, okay, Mary, we will start the questions with the members here first.
Sure.
Then I'll come to you. Then I'll ask Anita's question on her behalf. Okay, Lords, do you want to come in?
Could you possibly give any information with regards to any plans that the local authority may have with regards to falling roles? Because as you know, I'm a chair, and for the past few years, we've been contacted very late on in the academic year, and we were sort of given certain promises that, there would be meetings ongoing very early on in the academic year to work with us, to get us to work together in a collaborative way. And we still haven't heard anything, and it is a concern, and I think that it would do us all good. I know I represent a Catholic school, and I know we're going to be having meetings very soon, but I think that even the chairs from the Catholic schools want to work with our colleagues in our own neighbourhoods about, what's going to happen, what plans. That's my first question. And the other one is about the safety valve. I've done a lot of reading about the safety valve, and although it seems that we've got no other alternative but to accept it, I think some of us as chairs are very concerned about the disadvantages, which are not necessarily being aired as much as what you can find on the web. And we are very concerned about the implications for individual schools with regards to the adoption of this programme, which we seem to be forced into. So they're the two questions.
Okay, falling roles. I'm taking a report to Cabinet tomorrow, which is just the annual report on planned admission numbers. And the papers are published now and show the schools that have agreed to reduce their forms of entry. And we are between a rock and a hard place, as you know, on this. I'm surprised. I thought there had been meetings with the consultants and so on to schools, and I'll perhaps ask Anne to clarify on that point. If the question is, what are we doing? We have been working, obviously, around this, and there is the school's master plan. I've been convening a group to look at all the options and all the issues that emerge from that. Really, this is a huge strategic issue that isn't just confined to the falling numbers, because it impinges on because so many things impinge on this and our schools. And you know, Lords, that I'm always wanting to meet with governors in person, face to face, to have a proper dialogue. So I'll offer that opportunity so that we do that properly. I don't think that as you know, just to deviate slightly, that the current format of those Zoom meetings is very helpful in having the dialogue we need to have. And so I would hope that we can move on to do that and talk about the issues that affect individual schools and the borough more widely, because of the impact of the movement of population, the impact of temporary accommodation, all things you know from your school, which are reflected particularly in schools in the east of the borough. So we do need to have a much bigger plan route that extends beyond, oh, we've got falling roles, how we, what we're going to do. We have to be looking at where we are, we have to look ahead at the same time, and on the drivers that are affecting this. Ironically, a sort of safety valve is linked to that, if I go on to the other part of your second question, because whilst numbers are going, numbers in the receptions on the intake have gone down, SEND numbers haven't gone down so proportionately. So we need to look at how we can use our school estate in a much more creative or positive way to support children with special needs with the funding that we have, rather than buy places out borough, to look in borough, which is part of the whole, one of the big themes of Safety Valve, that we need to take that opportunity while we're looking across the programmes to develop and reconfigure SEND provision so we deliver in borough for children and not bus and go out, when we can deliver in borough with schools that we know of such good quality in our borough. So I think we have to see an opportunity and not see it all as a disadvantage, because we have a school estate that can be used effectively. Just like, the Nurture Hub at Seven Sisters or the Haringey Learning Partnership, and think very resourcefully from the early years right through to post 16. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but I do think that is an advantage, and obviously we need to bring the schools and the governors along with us. And I know that Jackie has talked to the heads, been to schools forum, she's been to heads meetings. If there is a gap in not sharing that effectively with governors, then we need to plug that.
Yeah, you wanted to come in, but I was going to say basically any question and responses should come through the chair. And also I was planning to take 2 questions at the same time, but that's fine. We will do that. You can come in.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to respond to the question about school place planning and the lack of engagement. It's my view that there's been extensive engagement that happened all through last year and through this year. As I say, that's my view, and that's evidenced through the work we consulted. We brought in a separate body. Evelyn's not here today to talk about the extensive engagement that has happened. This isn't work that the local authority can do by itself. And so with each planning area, Evelyn and her team have been working with head teachers to come to the arrangements. That's culminated in the report that's going to Cabinet tomorrow, where some schools are reducing their intake. So happy for Evelyn to come and give you some additional information as to which schools were visited when, but it's my view that there's been extensive engagement.
So you have a follow-up? Yeah. Okay.
I would challenge that. We did have a meeting in June for the division that my school is in, and what we were feeding back to the likes of Helen Jenner and whatever is that we would have liked far more intensive meetings, far more planning, coming together, because that meeting was a very positive one, but it was a one-off meeting, and we thought that there would be a meeting in September, whatever, where we'd be able to work together and to discuss the whole thing about SEND, how we can deliver it differently for that division, because there's just too many places within that, and we've got to look as a body. And people at that meeting, the Catholic schools as well as the other schools, were willing to work together in a collaborative way to we're not going to solve anything, but we might come up with some ideas about how we could at least work together. But we're still waiting for some type of plan.
And you can come in. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that you've mentioned those people that you mentioned, because they're the ones that I was thinking of. If there's further work to be done, absolutely, I agree. This is working together that we need to do. So I'm outside of here, I'm happy to speak with Evelyn, because I don't know the number of meetings. I just know that there have been meetings, and that has culminated in, as I say, a reduction to PAN in some schools, as said. There's another point I was going to make that slipped me. But oh yes, that we've worked also with the dioceses for Catholic schools. Councillor Brabazon and I have met with them at least on one occasion, possibly two, where we're speaking with them about the Catholic estate and what they want to do. So there is a lot of that's what I wanted to come and say, that there is a lot of dialogue that has happened. So I don't know whether if more is wanted, of course more will take place, but we've got to this phase in the schools, in our schools report, and there is more work that we need to do, because we still got more decisions to make collectively and together. So I'll end there, Chair.
Thank you for that.
Chair.
And
There are three parties here that need to be involved. There's the C of E, London Diocesan Board, there's the Archdiocese, there's local authority. And as to my understanding, there's been meetings with the Archdiocese about this. Certainly, and I've met with the London Diocesan Board. Everybody is really concerned about the numbers. Now, if we haven't, all we have to do is keep talking. So if I know that there was a working group with governors some time ago, which laid out the broad plan, and I don't think we could have gone, there could have been the formal reduction in the PANs without governing bodies agreeing those. So I do think there has been consultation, but I think we have to keep on, because we can't solve, this is a huge issue. And as you know, Lords, I've gone on about it personally, member of the Schools Forum for years and years. I could see what was happening, and now it's here. And so we have to be very proactive, but we have to look at the very big picture. So I really do hope, and I'll do an invitation, your chairs group, I'm happy to come and meet chairs and really have that dialogue. So that's, I don't think this is closed off at all.
thank you for that. Lottie, your question. Then we will go to Councillor Mason to ask her question. Then we'll bring Councillor Brabazon to answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt Bruley. Very simply, Zena, I'm just wondering, obviously we're relying very much on this safety valve funding. Do we have a deadline for when we will know about that?
Come back to the question after hearing other questions as well. Mary, would you like to come in and ask your questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks a lot for your very full report, Zena. It was really useful. I've got a couple of questions to ask. One is about we received the Think Family protocol, which Rob sent out after the last meeting. So thank you for that. In the Think Family protocol, I just wanted to double check, and I'm sure Anne will be able to help with this, whether the issue around perpetrators of domestic abuse and the safeguarding of children around that has been discussed, and particular in relation to social workers in schools, whether the stigma experienced by women affected by domestic abuse and the difficulty they then have with social care involvement, whether that's also being discussed. I don't think there's an easy answer, I'm not suggesting there is, but I just wanted to know that those dilemmas are under discussion, and they're being thought about, especially in terms of social workers being placed in primary schools. A little added extra to that is just, we used to have counsellors in all our schools, which was fantastic. And I know a lot of that's been cut. Can I just check and see whether there is any intention for counsellors to be put back into schools? and whether there are counts and how many schools, both primary and secondary, whether you know how many have got counsellors. I understand the funding is not central, but I think that they are really important in schools. The second question I've got is a completely different question, and this is about the interim CAS report and whether Haringey have been looking at that and considering that, particularly in relation to the model that's being suggested in the CAS report of having a guided and more thoughtful approach to transitioning rather than the affirmative approach which had been adopted by GIDS. And I wanted to know whether anything had gone out to schools or whether Haringey had taken down any guidance they were issuing via the Mermaids programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Zina, would you like to?
Regarding safety valve, I think this is not a straightforward question. So we're relying on the funding. What safety valve is about is if we, as part of the agreement, I'm going to pass to Anne in a minute for her more detailed and technical answer. But in the round, the government will wipe off a big chunk of our SEND overspend, which is predicted could go as high as something like 70 odd million by 27, 28, I think, unless this is dealt with. They will write off a big chunk of this if we have our change programme, which they agree. If we don't, they will say, fair enough, you can carry the overspend yourselves, which would probably damage the general fund. So it's not about relying on the fund. It's not a grant. It's an arrangement. It's an agreement. You do this and we'll do that. So that's what's being negotiated. And I'm as cabinet member, I wouldn't be at those meetings with the DfE. That would be for the officers. So I have to pass to Anne for a bit more detail in that response. So I'll pass to Anne for that. I might.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question was about when will we know, and so we'll know in December. I don't have an exact date as to when we'll know, but we expect to know in December the feedback from them, because they take the report to the minister. That's where it is now. I'm not sure which minister, but so that we're ready to go for the end of the financial year, beginning of the new one.
Regarding your questions, Mary, I couldn't hear all of it, but I think it's such detail about social care and social care issues that I would have to pass this to Anne and Beverly. Otherwise, you'd have to get an answer in writing, because this is not an area where I would have the depth of information that you're asking.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zina.
And do you want to come in, or is it Beverly?
Chair Beverly has her hand up to respond. Thank you, Beverly.
Okay, sorry, Beverly, I didn't see your hand. Yeah, can you come in to respond, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to the question on Mermaids, the organisation Mermaids in Schools, we did see Evelyn, the Assistant Director for Education, sends her apologies for tonight's meeting, but we could not find any evidence that schools had mermaids. To be sure, we wrote to them all last week to canvass whether they had or have not been engaged. To date, we've not had anything back, and I think that might be an indication that they're not involved. But we have given a deadline.
Beverly, sorry, can I just interrupt you for 2 seconds? We can hardly hear you. Apologies. Is there any way you could increase the volume, or I don't know?
We increase the volume in the room here.
I don't know if that's any better.
It's much better, thank you.
Okay, I'll just increase my volume slightly and raise my voice. So in terms of Mermaid, we don't have any evidence that our schools are engaged. To be sure, we have written to them, and that the note went out last week, and we're waiting to see what responses come back to us. So it might be helpful if we come back to you with a written note on what some of the responses from our very many schools. But to date, we weren't aware of any such engagement with our schools. In relation to the Think Family Protocol and the reference there for domestic abuse, we haven't gone through a single eclectic style with the social workers in school. So our spectrum of intervention, first of all, there is intervention, and our social workers in schools lead that intervention, but along with partners from our Violence Against Women and Girls and other voluntary organisations. So the social workers will make referral where the threshold is satisfied that you need a dedicated social worker working with the whole family. And if that threshold isn't satisfied, the social workers in school pull in agencies as is appropriate to the themes, patterns and needs emerging in the school community. We think that approach has worked very well. And it's also enabled the school to strengthen their relationships with the Safer Neighbourhood Police, and they still get their Encompass relay reports that enables them to take specific action to a specific family as the issue is live, because they usually get the relay notifications come out within 24 hours of the police concluding their work with the incident that has been referred to them. In relation to counsellors in schools, that we would need to canvass the views on. I can tell you from my own visit to schools and conversations with head teachers that many schools have invested in pastoral support, and that of course is to do with ensuring that children are nurtured and their needs are met, particularly at primary school, but they can bring in counsellors as it sees fit. But we don't know that there's a wholesale approach to bringing in counsellors in schools. We do know through COVID that CAMS deployed workers to go into schools, but that was specific to the COVID. If you permit me, we'll come back with a separate more detailed note on the extent of whether and the plans around counselling services or access is what I think we're really trying to get to therapeutic type of support for children in schools as the need arises.
Thank you very much, Beverly, for a really full report. I'll get in touch with you about therapeutic support in schools directly, if that's okay.
I have no issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. I have two questions. Actually, the questions are from Anita, our corporate members. So I just want to read them out. The first question is, what is the local authority's expectation from schools about dealing with including recording and logging and addressing racial incidents in schools? How do you know what is happening on the ground? What evidence base is being used and what powers do the local authority have to enforce good practice to inform a strategic response across the borough? This is the first question. The second question is, historically, racial incidents are being underreported in schools, and qualitative data from parents, carers and children confirms this. What can be done to address the barriers to reporting incidents, i.e. inconsistent definition of racial incidents, lack of knowledge or confidence of parents and children reporting staff not understanding what constitutes racism or racist incidents, a lack of knowledge of children and lack of knowledge of children of the process where they are in place, fear of repercussions when reporting parents' children, and lack of confidence of staff to report, etc., which in turn impacts if and how racial incidents are dealt with. Is there specific work being done to understand and address these barriers to reporting? Thank you.
Thanks for those questions, Anita. They're really important. I think the thing to start with is to say that Anne chairs a BAME steering group within the local authority, which is attended by officers, head teachers and governors across local authority, which is done with Haringey Education Partnership. And that is where a lot of these issues are discussed, which you asked about what's happening across the schools. So the BAME steering group, I think it's called the Race Quality Group now.
It is.
It's been renamed, looks at inclusive curriculum, challenges unconscious bias, looks at curriculum and school resources. We'll talk about exclusions and many of the things that you've raised in your questions. So strategically, that's where a lot of this debate would happen. And all the schools have signed the pledge. Most have signed up to, if not all, have signed up to a pledge, which includes having the difficult conversations across the school community with staff, but also with parents, carers, and to educate, support, and deal with the incidents, racist behaviour and incidents, and so on. Regarding exclusion work that we're doing, a lot of that also comes from that collective group that Anne chairs that's convened with the Education Partnership. And I know from attending the meetings that a lot of work goes on individually in schools talking about these issues. But what I need to emphasise with regard to the first question is we have all these expectations, but schools are self-governing. So the local authority itself doesn't hold a record. Those are held in individual schools. Where there is a racial element to any permanent exclusion, we would hold the detail. I'm pleased to say this year there haven't been any permanent exclusions. But where it isn't around permanent exclusion, it's the schools that hold the information themselves. And that would be part of, excuse me, the head teachers report to governors. So at every governing body, there will be reports about exclusions, about incidents and so on. And then the challenge comes from the governing body, although of course extraneous to that are the advisory support, the stuff that comes from the advisors going into the schools. But essentially a lot of that stuff happens within the school and they hold the records. And that's, I think, best answer I can give you.
Thank you very much for that response. I'm going to close on this item because we sort of passed over, but it was useful to obviously have cabinet member here and ask our questions directly. I'm going to move to item 8 now. Item 8 is support for children and families in the during the cost of living crisis. We have Jean Taylor will be presenting what actually we are doing in Haringey in terms of like helping families towards cost of living crisis and helping families with children. So I will invite Jean to do her presentation. Then following that, we'll have an opportunity to ask our questions as well. Jill, you can begin.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jean Taylor. I'm the Head of Policy and Strategy at the Council. I'm sorry not to be able to join you this evening. I have some cold and flu symptoms, and I didn't think you'd appreciate me sharing them in the kind of context of a pandemic. So I've just been asked to give you a brief update this evening on the Council's response to the cost of living crisis. Obviously with a kind of particular focus on the support that we're providing to children, young people and their families. So I'm hoping that you can see some slides on the screen. Could I just
look for see them.
You can. Okay, good. So what I'm going to do today is just kind of give you an overview of the kind of the Council's overarching response to cost of living. And then I'll move on just to kind of within that kind of detail to highlight some of the kind of specific aspects of support that we've kind of deliberately orientated towards supporting children and young people and recognizing the kind of the prevalence of and impact of child poverty in the borough and the need to mitigate its worst effects. So just in terms of kind of setting the context, I know I don't probably need to go into a kind of huge amount of kind of detail for you this evening, given that you've very recently concluded a scrutiny commission on child poverty in the borough. So you'll be very familiar with the kind of the statistics that kind of show the kind of the quite high rate of child poverty in the borough. We have the kind of 5th highest rate of all London borough. And the kind of particular prevalence of and concentration of poverty amongst Haringey families with children. In the context of cost of living, it's probably helpful though just to bring your attention to some of the specific statistics around food and fuel poverty. You may be aware, for example, that Haringey has the 4th highest level of fuel poverty in the capital, with a rate of 18%. It's also kind of worth noting that being aware of in the context of significantly increased fuel costs, even in the context of some of the kind of protections that have been offered, we have a high degree of exposure in the borough to fuel poverty. 73% of our properties, for example, have energy efficiency ratings of D to G, which mean they're very kind of exposed to the kind of high cost of fuel. And we would expect that to be reflected in increased pressures on our households across the board. But of course, kind of recognise there'll be a range of sort of sets of circumstances that mean that families with children and young people may have kind of particular kind of draws on fuel. I think as a committee, you will be aware that we use a tool called the Low Income Family Tracker, which uses council benefits data to track the numbers of families likely to be experiencing financial hardship or kind of crisis in the borough. What that tells us now is that we currently have, and these are statistics from September, so kind of quite recent, about 32,000 households in the borough on that database, of which kind of 2/3 are families with children. So those are kind of families who are in receipt of benefits and likely to have some level of financial hardship. Within those, about 13% were considered on the basis of kind of LIFT methodologies to be in cash shortfall, so either at risk or currently in crisis, as defined by the system. 10% were in rent arrears, almost 17% experiencing a level of food poverty, 42% or pushing 43% experiencing fuel poverty, and a really striking 83% experiencing water poverty. It's worth saying that I would obviously like to be able to give you some kind of trend information from LIFT. What we see kind of looking at LIFT is that because of the way that the data is kind of drawn and analysed, the trends are not huge, entirely kind of robust. It also takes a while for the impact of kind of policy decisions to show up. So I haven't, for that reason, shared with you trend information. The broad message, though, is that there are a number of those indicators against which we are seeing an uptick. So, as an organisation, we obviously really have a really significant level of kind of concern about this this kind of national kind of crisis on our residents, and particularly kind of our most vulnerable residents. As such, there's a kind of a coordinated kind of cross-council response has been initiated. This includes housing management services. And the role of this kind of cross-cutting coordination group will be to look across the kind of levers available to the council and to kind of coordinate activity to respond to and mitigate cost of living pressures. That includes the compilation of a winter risk register that's been compiled by emergency planning colleagues and will guide our work. You'll know from having seen kind of previous emergency planning work that obviously that will involve ongoing assessment of risks and impacts that will inform ongoing planning. And it's kind of worth noting that work has been led by Jess Crow as the director for culture, strategy and engagement. The second element of the cost of living response, as you'd expect, is a significant amount of work to understand need and to monitor the impact of this crisis on residents. That includes work to map the nature and extent of pre-existing poverty, debt and financial hardship, because we obviously kind of understand that those are some of the resident groups who will be most impacted. And within that, we are looking at the types of socio-demographic characteristic and circumstances that we kind of know will expose people more to some of the expressions of kind of cost of living kind of pressures, so food poverty, fuel poverty, etc. We'll be using that information to target kind of the support that we're making available, whether that's communications and information, or whether that's about some of the kind of the financial support that we are in a position to provide. We're saying that we're also kind of using a range of existing kind of forums and networks to gather kind of real-time qualitative feedback on the kind of cost of living. That extends through a range of kind of community forums and VCS kind of forums that we're involved in, through to the council's debt and financial hardship partnership group. Third element of the cost of living, of our cost of living response, as you would expect, relates to financial support and benefits maximisation. We understand that the kind of, one of, the absolutely kind of best thing we can do from our residents is to maximise the amount of money in their pockets so that they can make choices about what they need to kind of prioritise at a household level. That extends through a range of activities, through from the work of the financial support team to the way that we are targeting the household support fund, through to the use of the council tax reduction scheme and our discretionary housing payments. We've also undertaken kind of proactive work to target all council tenants and leaseholders with information about the support available. What I'd like to do, though, is just kind of give you a bit of in-depth information about the way that we have used the kind of household support fund. The household support fund, you'll be aware, is one of the kind of, it is a significant kind of pot of money funded through central government, and is one of our kind of main kind of levers since 2020 for supporting those who need it most. It was initiated in the context of kind of COVID, and has evolved over the last kind of couple of years into a pot of funding that is more orientated towards cost of living support. The intention is that the kind of money is used to support vulnerable households with daily needs such as food, clothing and utilities. We're now in the third round of this funding, and it's worth noting that with each round of funding there's been a new set of criteria. What I'd bring your attention to on this slide is the detail of our kind of decisions about how we use this third round of funding. And what you'll note in green are the kind of the specific commitments that support children and young people. So £1 million of the household support fund has gone to the free school meal extension in school holidays. There is money, there are sums of £100 per family going to families with children under 5, kind of to recognise that we won't reach those through free school meal entitlement, as well as kind of payments to families with no recourse to kind of public funds. There are also specific payments to care leavers to recognise their vulnerability. In addition, we are using LIFT to identify families at risk or in crisis, and directing payments of £100 to households with children ineligible for free school meals. I won't go into detail of the kind of the rest of the household support fund, but I think kind of the overall picture that you will see there is that there's a really, really significant emphasis in the decisions that we've made on supporting children and their families. Just moving on, a fourth kind of aspect of the cost of living crisis relates to a significant program of work around communications to residents, businesses and other stakeholders. Sorry, I'm getting really bad feedback. I don't know if there's something I can do to address that. I don't know if there's a mic
Sorry,
on.
you said you're getting feedback.
Sorry, yes, I'm getting a bad echo, but I will proceed. But
we can hear you perfectly fine,
okay.
Jean. We can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay.
I was gonna say yes. Are you? Sorry.
Sorry, I've just got I've just got a couple more slides. Is that okay, Council Chair? Shall I finish those?
Yes,
yeah, okay,
finish
brilliant.
your slides, then we will have obviously an opportunity to ask questions as well.
Lovely, thank you. So I mean, not much to, more to kind of say, but I did just want to kind of share with you kind of the detail of our approach to communication to residents. So it's worth saying that we've been quite thoughtful about the way that we've kind of we've designed this kind of communication. The kind of the core aim is obviously to ensure that people are aware of the support that's available. But really importantly, there are additional objectives that are about maximising kind of take-up of support and really critically putting stigma and dignity reducing stigma and putting dignity at the heart of what we do and say. And I know from your work as a committee on the child poverty report that reduction of kind of stigma is something that you were very kind of concerned by and wanted to see kind of prioritised. We are also really kind of importantly kind of looking to build on kind of community assets, relationships, and taking a kind of strength-based approach to the way we kind of communicate. That communication has been reflected in a range of outputs, including a really significant kind of print run of a detailed Haringey Here to Help leaflet, which kind of covers a really wide range of sources of support. There's also been a kind of dedicated leaflet addressed to parents and children that has gone out through schools and has focused on support available at half term, but also sought to drive take up of free school meal entitlement, recognising that as a result of kind of change in circumstances, there'll be large numbers of families who may be kind of newly entitled to receive statutory kind of provision. And then finally, it's kind of worth saying that there are kind of plans also for a kind of cost of living kind of podcast to again raise awareness of the programme. And the kind of the plan is to have a podcast focused on help to parents and carers. Finally, I'm aware I've kind of spoken for a bit of time, but I think you'll all be aware from the kind of very kind of proactive comms about the kind of wider work that's ongoing, including on kind of warm banks. And it's worth, of course, also kind of recognising that the expanded free school meal scheme that we have locally, including the discretionary element, is in place. And that we have been able to kind of continue to fund school holiday provision during October half term. In terms of next steps, what you can expect to see over the next 6 months is for the work that I've described to continue. There is ongoing planned activity in the kind of community, both via work with kind of statutory partners, the VCS, and other partners, including via our debt and financial inclusion partnership. There are also a number of kind of cabinet and the community sessions that will be rolling out between now and Christmas, including a planned session in schools. As we kind of proceed, we will be kind of monitoring the impacts of what we do via engagement with kind of residents and communities, and what you can expect to see, reflecting our kind of priority focus on children and young people, is that we will be looking to understand in detail the ongoing impact of this kind of crisis on children and young people. So I'll leave it there, and I'm really obviously kind of happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jean, for a comprehensive list of activities that the council is doing to mitigate the cost of living crisis. That was very, very useful. Thank you for that. Any question, members? Lords, you have any one question, but I can see that there is one on screen. Is that Councillor Mason? Okay, Lords, then Councillor Mason.
Jill, I've been reading a lot of information from Enfield, Camden, and of course we had the wonderful presentation some months ago from Tower Hamlets about what was being done at a more strategic level than maybe what you've been suggesting to us tonight. And I was just wondering whether Haringey is thinking in that way. I mean, one of the things that I found was really interesting today was, and it was, I mean, in Enfield, they did I know it does go back to 2020 now. Whether they've followed through is another matter. But like, I had never thought about using the landlord license scheme to actually sort of, you know, be at the core of some of this work in actually getting landlords to ensure that sort of, you know, that they do things with their rented properties which will enhance the living conditions of some of our children, particularly in the area where, you know, the school where I'm a chair is, because really sort of we have to deal with parents the whole time coming in and really crying and coming to us about sort of, you know, the state of living conditions that their children are actually living in. I was just wondering whether you've thought through about going the next step and making it more strategic, also bringing in health inequalities, you know, and gathering that and putting it all together.
Thanks for that, Lords. I'll take Councillor Mason's question, then Jill, I will bring you after that.
Thanks a lot, and thank you for the presentation. I found it really useful. I'm very involved with the food network, the food banks and food network in Haringey, and thank you to the Cabinet for meeting with people from the food network last week. Unfortunately, I've got COVID, so I couldn't get there, but there we go. So some of the questions I've got are to do with how the council officers and how yourself and your strategy relate to what's going on in the communities. And I know quite a lot of your work is via schools, but I think that in the food banks, unfortunately, we are seeing a huge rise in the number of people coming to the food banks. And so in Bounds Green, which kind of is in the corner of Bounds Green and Wood Green, an area of high deprivation, then we've had a significant increase with well over 400 people a week coming to the food bank, and each one represents 3.5 people. So you can see we're talking about over 1,000 people. The intention of food banks, of course, was for COVID. It wasn't for this crisis now. And I think that's something that all of us in the Food Network are worried about. And I think it feeds into what Lourdes is saying about the need for a longer term strategic approach, as well as, of course, the work that you're doing now to address the immediate situation. But the food banks are really straining. They're finding it really difficult. And so I do think that we need to do some more work from the council with the food banks in order to make sure that they are maintained. Because if you can't afford food and you can't afford fuel and your housing is really poor and the landlords are putting the rent up, then the pressure is huge. Secondly, we also run from Bounds Green and one or two other food banks. We run an advice and support service in conjunction with CAB, but it isn't staffed by anybody except for some volunteers. Luckily, I come from an advice and support background, and so I've been able to train up some people, and we've worked with CAB a bit, but we could really do with people from the council coming on a regular basis, like the finance team, having a day maybe at different food banks so that they can take on some of the caseload, which is now being just dealt with by volunteers. We do see people who probably aren't seen anywhere else. And I think the finance support that you're doing is fantastic. It's great, but there are a layer of people who will not phone finance support because they don't know where to start because things are so difficult for them. And they can only really be helped in face-to-face work. So that's a positive request, but also about working more close, recognising, I suppose, that there are people who will not can't be signposted anywhere, because they won't be, because they don't really have the resources or the confidence to go to the council.
Thank you for that, Jean.
Brilliant. Thank you both for two really really helpful kind of an interesting kind of questions. As you say, Councillor Mason, they are kind of the questions feel very related. So just to take your question first, Lourdes. I mean, the sort of the short answer is yes. We absolutely kind of recognise the need for a kind of long-term kind of strategic response. I think that there's a recognition that there's a real risk that we treat this as a sort of short-term crisis, and don't recognise that both the kind of the causes of some of the impacts that we're seeing today, but also kind of the ongoing triggers for these, or kind of trends that are driving this crisis, are long term. So, you know, we know, for example, that kind of food sustainability is likely to be significantly disrupted as a result of not just kind of global events, but kind of climate change. We know that kind of poverty is a kind of really significant issue that will take many kind of years to kind of address in the borough. So whilst our kind of focus through the kind of cost of living work is for the next 6 months on responding to and mitigating the immediate kind of crisis, we've been taking we've been doing some kind of thinking about what our kind of long-term kind of strategic approach is, and seeking kind of to assess the kind of degree to which, as an organisation, we are using the range of levers available to us to address the causes of poverty in the borough, and to kind of mitigate its worst impacts. And like you, I've been very attracted by the work that Tower Hamlets has undertaken. I really like the model that they've used to think about the levers available to them, and we have developed a draft of a similar set of way of articulating the levers available to us and the kind of existing activity that we're already doing under those levers, but also to kind of think about in a way sort of similar to kind of Tower Hamlets, how we will do this. So, you know, how we will sort of seek to address poverty, but, you know, recognizing the sort of strong history and kind of practice that Harrogate has around early intervention and prevention, for example, recognizing our desire to really ensure that stigma is eliminated, and and that dignity is sort of central to our approach. So a kind of emerging strategy exists, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And what we'll be doing is, as soon as we've kind of got a bit more kind of bandwidth and capacity, we'll be moving into kind of articulating that and kind of and building it. I'm really grateful for the example you've given of work in Enfield on the kind of landlord. It's actually a kind of a topic we've been discussing earlier today is at the Debt and Financial Hardship Partnership, and I will take that away and see if there's kind of learning we can take from that. Councillor Mason, just on your kind of question, I do we are of course kind of hearing kind of messages from food banks about increased demands and kind of concerns about sustainability. There are kind of I think kind of plans going into autumn to kind of come and do some kind of to have some detailed kind of conversations to understand what you are seeing on the ground from a food provision kind of point of view, and then to kind of take a longer term view and understand how we can work together with both food banks and kind of our wider kind of food ecosystem, if you like. So that work is being led by Jill Taylor's team, but with support from my team. So you can expect to see that kind of work emerging, and of course, and somebody will be, I'm sure, in contact with you very soon to see, Councillor Mason, how we can kind of best kind of involve you and your kind of colleagues into that. Also really interesting to hear you talk about advice and support in kind of community settings. This is a theme that is kind of coming out very strongly of a lot of our conversations. I think there's a really strong appetite to kind of build on what we have seen in terms of the kind of the work on the ground, sort of voluntary and sector kind of community organisations and other kind of community members can play in terms of the provision and advice and support. And we have a really strong interest in how we can develop that. Our recent kind of submission of plans under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund included some provision for community capacity building around energy efficiency advice. That was because that's what, the criteria of that funding was orientated in that direction. But I think there is a kind of wider interest in how the kind of council can work with and support sort of boots on the ground with those really kind of rich relationships, kind of recognizing that those are sometimes the organizations who are better placed to reach some kind of communities than maybe we will be, whether it's through those kind of formal support kind of channels or through other kind of relationships. So again, that feels like an emerging kind of piece of work and a conversation again that kind of that has been coming out of the Debt and Financial Hardship Partnership. But again, I'm very kind of grateful for you raising that, because I think it really reinforces the interest and appetite for that kind of working.
Great, thank you very much for that. Any other question? No. Jane, I just wanted to clarify. My understanding is that you sort of mentioned about the communication. My understanding that what currently the council is offering in terms of support, it's going to be like put all into an advice on a leaflet, and that's going to be delivered to every household in Haringey. So the council is already putting a lot of attention on communication and making sure that every household who is in need of support gets hold of that information and they're able to contact the relevant people. Yeah, just to clarify if that's the case.
So I've been trying to clarify myself today whether the leaflet will go to every Haringey household. What I do know from an update today is that kind of the leaflet is already in our libraries, and there are plans to kind of push it out to our welcome hubs, our food hubs, our housing estates, and kind of job centres, and the leaflet has been translated into all of our key community languages, and that leaflet will be embedded on the Haringey Here to Help webpage, and is available to print on request. I think copies of the leaflet will also be kind of coming for distribution to kind of full council, so that all members have a copy for themselves and are aware of its kind of contents. I think the reason I hesitate on kind of the delivery to all households is I believe that may be in the initial plan. I think kind of the cost of the kind of the leaflet is really sort of significant. So there is certainly a kind of a heavily kind of targeted approach, and I think, and there is really kind of heavy investment in translation into kind of community languages. So the leaflet will have really kind of significant reach, including to people, if advice workers and other kind of help, and other partners who will be able to use it. But I don't want to kind of mislead you on the kind of universal distribution question, because I'm not 100% sure on the answer to that myself yet.
Thank you for that. I wanted to also, I mean, it's really good that the leaflet it's been translated into various community languages. And I think the other option is that most community organization, there are a number of community centers that represents, like it's attended by different communities. So maybe as well as libraries, schools and other kind of areas, we could also target community centers with leaflets and information as well. So just to make sure that everybody is like able to access that information. But yeah, thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation, and it seems like obviously it's in the heart of this committee, like the like our concerns about the rising poverty in the society, in our community, and we wanted to make sure that council is doing everything it can to support the families and children in difficult situation in this difficult time. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for attending.
Thank you. Good night.
Next item of in the items on the agenda is the summer program for children and young people. So to present this report, I will invite Daniel Bell and Erica Ovasu Bolting to present the report, and we will obviously have an opportunity to ask some question. Apologies for if I mispronounced your name. I often get that myself, sorry. Yeah, apology if I mispronounced your name. You may begin.
Jean, can I just ask you to stop sharing quickly and we'll share ours?
Sorry about that. I've done that now.
Thank you. There you go. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Evening, everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name's Daniel Ball. I'm the Leisure Client Contract Manager for the Active Communities team, and I oversee the Community Holiday Programme, and I'll let Erica introduce herself.
Good evening all, I'm Erica Rusu Botang. I am the Holiday Activity and Food Programme Manager, leading the programme at the present. So, conscious you've all received the pack with all the details in, so I won't go into too much details on each of the side, but we just wanted to capture some of the key information that was presented in the report. The first slide that Dan's got showing is the key
Erica, sorry, can I just stop you for 1 second?
Yeah,
we can hardly hear you. I think, can you try to increase the volume of your equipment?
Is that better without the headset? Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, slightly better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and raise my voice as well. I don't think the headset was helping me. Yes, so as I was saying, I'm the lead for the holiday activity programme, which I will reference as the HAF programme throughout the presentation. The HAF programme is funded from the Department of Education, and following the further 3 years of funding that DfE announced that's going to take us up to March 2025, we was able to deliver this second year of the HAF programme within Haringey. The difference between, say, the HAF programme and the community holiday programme is that the funding criteria for the HAF, we got quite strict criteria that this is targeting children and young people that are eligible for free school meals. And the aim is to address holiday hunger. So the key focus around the holiday provision is the offer of food as well as a food education to help support the young people and their families. As the report outlines, some of the key achievements that we achieved for the HAF programme this summer was the increase among our SEND, early years and young people aged 11 to 16. This is following adapting the programme to address these target areas that we wanted to engage more for the HAF this summer. We also found that the HAF programme, following this being the second year, the awareness of it grew across providers as well as families. So we had an increase of providers able and willing to deliver HAF focused sessions, hence why we was able to have over 41 providers delivering a HAF session across 49 sites. This enabled us to also increase our offer across the board for HAF families. We also had an increase of volunteers taking part in the programme, which was really good in the sessions. Dan, you can go to the next slide.
So yeah, so as I mentioned, I I oversee the community summer holiday program, which Eric kind of alluded to, which is more tasked at sort of providing positive activities during the summer holidays, and is since the sort of arrival of the HAF program is something we've tried to marry up and how they can link into one another. So this is just a bit of an example of some of the activities that we did over the summer holidays. So we had £1 swimming at those centres. We did various sort of basketball at Duckett's Common, and we do a lot of sort of drop-in activities that are kind of tend to be more popular for sort of the older young people proportion within the community projects. We did some targeted work, such as the sort of ice skating vouchers for Ali Pali. So we work closely with the sort of the youth centres and as well as sort of family support workers and early help, and sort of distributing those to families that might most need it. Just to give you a bit of an idea of where the sort of delivery took place over the summer, the yellow dots are locations for the Holiday and Food programme, whereas the red dots are the community programme. As you will be aware, the majority of our delivery takes place in the east of the borough, where sort of areas of deprivation are at the highest. That's the same with the free school meals as well, where the percentage of free school meal recipients are mainly in the east. In terms of the west delivery that we do, we tend to do more strategic delivery there. So, for example, one of the holiday and the community holiday programme do is we work with Campsbourne Primary to identify a few students at the primary school which we can sponsor spaces on a program that takes place there. So a lot of the stuff in the east of the borough is kind of open to everyone and anyone can attend it, whereas some of the more strategic work and sort of targeted work in the west of the borough. Erica, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, and just in regards to how we targeted these areas, I say the mapping was provided from our council's performance team, and as well as outlining where our need is for the free school meal families, we also utilise the information about areas of crime as well as some of the areas with other, as Dan mentioned, the high levels of deprivation. And as you can probably see, there were a couple of HAF provision that's slightly outside of the borough. Those are some of the work that we've done with neighbouring, like around with Hackney. We've done some work with the Orthodox Jewish community, where the majority of their schools and their delivery is based outside of the borough, but they do support a number of Haringey young people. We also have a couple of students that maybe go to school within Haringey but live outside, slightly out the borough, or vice versa. So we utilise those slightly out of the borough provisions to address those needs.
So just to give you a bit of an idea of the promotion during the summer, so this year again we delivered and we produced a hard copy booklet. So we printed 25,000 copies of the booklet this year. So that was an increase on last year of around sort of 4,000, more than last year. The majority of these were distributed to primary schools and secondary schools and community centres, and I've given you some examples of sort of where we sort of sent those, the majority of those. We also sort of gave them out when we attended events over the summer. One big increase that we saw this year was the online engagement. So again, we saw sort of a sort of 34% increase in the number of unique booklet downloads, and which is kind of off the back of increased engagement through social media. And when we're at events, we have the QR code that people can download. So we try and sort of promote it. We've got the hard copies, but we've also got the electronic copies to sort of push out as much as we can. As well as there's been that increased, a huge increase in the number of individuals visiting the HAF webpage as well. Just a bit of sort of monitoring data that we collected was the vast majority of the community programme was from the N17 postcode. And that kind of matches where our delivery in terms of N17 and 15 and 22, and that time kind of marries up with sort of where the delivery took place. The majority of the unique attendees were males. However, when females did attend, they tended to attend on a more regular basis. So there's a bit of a two-way. Well, for sort of going forward, what we'd want to do is try and figure out what activities might attract women and girls a bit more, or maybe it's sort of the locations we're using and sort of exploring about how we might be able to engage that cohort a bit more. And the other side of it is, okay, we've got males attending, but then how do we engage them for a longer process? How do we make them come back on a more regular basis? I just want to sort of point out we did some specific programming around disabled children as well, such as inclusive cycling, the Moorfield projects, as well as some special school delivering in the HAF program. There is a big focus within our service around creating more hyper-inclusive sessions and activities. So we'll be doing the sort of disability-specific stuff, but also sort of making our sort of everyday delivery as inclusive as possibly can, so that we have disabled children and non-disabled children physically active together and taking part together.
Continue on with the monitoring data, we also captured information regarding the ethnicity and the age of our participants. As you can see by the graph, the majority of attendees of both the HAF program was among our Black African community. We did some targeted work with the Somali youths during this summer holiday program. And they was able to kind of get an increase across and work closely with that community, which was quite a great program. They offered a number of multi-sports trips to various locations, as well as the food and education provision. We also can see with around the age of participants across both the HAF and community. The HAF program, because of the structure of the HAF sessions, where it's a lot more structured, where the delivery has to be a minimum of 16 days provision during the summer holiday and up to 4 hours, minimum 4 hours delivery each day. Because of that structured delivery, we find that more the young people attend, so the primary age children, because that kind of works more regarding the childcare needs that some of those families will have. Hence, you see that we have a large number of the 8 to 11-year-olds attending the HAF. We also, for this summer, increased our provision within the early years. We used our 15% eligibility flexibility that the DfE enables every local authority. For example, the Free School Meals is targeting for those eligible for the Free School Meals program. HAF is targeted those eligible for free school meals, so aged 5 to 16. However, we can use up to 15% of the budget for other vulnerable families we want to work with. So we targeted early years as one of the groups we wanted to target within that flexibility. Hence was the increase of the 0 to 7 in the provision this summer. The nature of the community holiday programs, as they're more of a drop-in, casual, less hours, that sort of attracts more of the older young people, and that's what you can see with the community out there. 12 to 15 is their kind of a high cohort attendance there. The HAF saw an increase of about 48% in the older young people actually for this year compared to summer, due to the flexibility DfE enabled local authorities to tailor the program slightly. So we was able to offer food provision at some of the existing holiday provisions that might not deliver all the HAF criteria, but as long as they had that physical activity and it was targeting some free school meals on vulnerable families, we was able to use some of the HAF funding to provide food and be able to use them in our monitoring. So for the future delivery, so as I mentioned, the HAF, oh, sorry, just the last slide, just to summarise, with the HAF funding, DfE have announced that the further 3 years funding takes us up to March 2015. The funding for HAF is only available during the longer holidays, so that's the Easter, summer and Christmas school holidays. Therefore, some of the things we're planning to work towards with that is increasing our schools that we work with, especially some key schools in some higher areas of deprivation. Also wanted to ensure that we increase our food provision. So we're going to continue and also increase our partnership with food banks and charities like Felix projects that can help increase our resources of food. Dan?
Yeah, just to finish up, I think I kind of mentioned these within the presentation. So again, we've had this idea where we need to try and figure out how we engage more female participants in the activity, but also how we explore ways to have that ongoing engagement from our male participants. One thing we want to really look into over the next year or so is about how we can streamline our data collection a bit easier. You understand the necessity around it, and it's just about how we make that as easy as possible for ourselves, but also our providers as well. And as I mentioned, we want to continue our work around sort of the inclusion side of thing, and this kind of links in with our sort of wider work within sort of the active communities around how we work with existing providers to make them as inclusive they possibly can, but also try and find new providers and new ways of working that we can provide activities that allow for both disabled young people and non-disabled people to participate together. And that brings us to the end.
Sorry if we've been over our time, but if there's any questions anybody has.
Great. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Daniel, for that presentation. We've already got a couple of hands up. I just wanted to, before I take Anna to ask her question, I want to ask a really quick question in terms of like most of the biggest participants on the summer program activities were like primary school sort of age children. Is there a specific reason for where they targeted towards the younger generation of like younger children than teenagers? Or was it difficult to get the teenagers engaged? I think basically I'm just trying to understand why there was a higher participant among the school, primary school age children, but not secondary school age children. You can answer me after I take Councillor Abella's question as well. And yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the useful presentation. My question is similar to the Chair's in that it's related to the composition of the cohort you attracted. So in the summary report we received ahead of this meeting, you say that the majority of unique attendees were male, but females tended to visit on a more regular basis. And so I wanted to know whether you have a view on why it was difficult to maintain the engagement of boys and younger men. And secondly, in your recommendations for future delivery, you then say that a priority is to increase the number of activities that attract female participants. But it seems from the report that once you do attract female participants, they do keep coming regularly, but you're having a problem maintaining the engagement of young men. So should the focus be more on that cohort rather than on girls and young women? Thank you.
Third question, Mary, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And thank you very much for that report, really useful and interesting. I just wanted to raise the issue of where the sites were placed for both these programmes, because I'm actually a councillor in Bounds Green, and as you can see, it's an area of higher deprivation than some of the other areas, but it sits within what's called the west of the borough, and we have not got any community space, and we had very little, very few programmes going on. So the people who really couldn't, you know, there wasn't nothing locally basically. So I'd really like to ask that we have a little look at where those sites are and to see whether there is any possibility of making sure that areas which have got large numbers of families and people living in deprivation are able to access. And one other small point is that in several of those areas, there's a high proportion of people in private rented sector accommodation. And where people are in private rented sector accommodation, this can often be, not always, but often be very poor accommodation. And so actually getting out in the holidays and getting food and also activities is even more important. So that's a little urge really to look for new partnerships, particularly in areas where those programs aren't being offered, and also to look at the potential for using schools in the summer holidays and in the Christmas and other holidays, because they're a free resource. Well, they're not free, I know you have to pay, but they are a resource which are sitting there, and they're geared towards children, and yet they're just shut in the holidays. So I'd be really interested to see whether there was any potential there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Erica and Daniel, do you want to respond? Thank you.
I'll start with the first question regarding why the high increase of primary school. The HAF program itself attracts majority of the primary school age children due to the structure of the program, where at that age parents are still in control about looking about the childcare, so they'll be the ones to will sign them up to the program and maintain and stay them there. Where you find with some of the older young people, once they've got that little bit more of a freedom and maybe not encouraged, there'd be more for them to make that choice of where they would go and attend. And even though we have and will continue to adapt our program to meet that cohort, it is a harder cohort to engage, especially for the HAF, because of the structure of the HAF. A lot of the older young people would like to just do the drop-ins, come up at different times. The 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock starting sessions with the majority of the HAF programs might not be that much attractive to them, and especially when they feel that there are going to be younger people attending, they don't really feel that might be a site for them. So what we find is that the community program that Dan leads, they attracts more. So then we add on the HAF by adding the food provision to those set ones, and then continue to keep the HAF programs, which will target more the primary age. But we do have a number of providers that do entail in some of their programs for the older young people, but you find majority target for the primary age. Don't know if you want to add anything more to that, Dan?
No, again, I agree. I think the nature of it being a kind of a drop-in activities and a lot of the sort of parks and open spaces is something that engages those sort of that older cohort. Things such as the sort of basketball delivery at Turnpike Lane, in terms of the late night stuff, is specifically for, that's again, it tends to be when the sort of older young people are hanging around, don't have much going on. So yeah, I think in terms of why, again, with ours, we tend to have sort of a larger number of sort of the sort of 13, 14 plus engaged within those sort of type of drop-in activities, especially the sort of late night stuff at Duckett's Common. So yeah, so again, just agreeing with Erica. Just in terms of the sort of that ongoing engagement with male participants and young men, I think it's not that the young men are coming once and then never coming back. They are coming on a fairly regular basis, I must admit. However, and I'll just use this as an example. We had a dance session at the engine room run for a few weeks, and pretty much every participant came every day. All the participants were female. And we had about sort of 15 participants. It wasn't a massive number, but it's quite a small sort of dance studio, and you probably about the max you could have. But again, all 15 came every day for 2.5 weeks. Whereas I guess when with the some of our other programs, like again, we're going back to Duckett's, it is a very much more, it's a lot less structured. It is just Hesketh, one of our really trusted providers, is down there. He engages with them as much as they sort of want to be engaged with. If they just want to go and play basketball on their own and not have anything structured or have any sort of drills, etc., they can do that. Whereas again, I guess the sort of the engine room was a lot more structured, and that tended to attract the young females a bit better. One caveat I would have on the data is the £1 swimming numbers. We can't, the way that sort of the Fusion's booking system works is we can't distinguish the gender of who came, which, and we know that from sort of previous work we've done, we do get a good number of females taking part in swimming. And that's something we're sort of on an ongoing basis trying to work with Fusion as much as we can in terms of how we get a good representation of sort of what that data set looks like as well. But just a bit of a caveat, I guess, in terms of the numbers we're receiving in that. And that's, I think one of the questions was around should we focus again more on the sort of that longer term engagement with young men. I think from our point of view, it's something we can do on both points. I think we might have something to do around sort of how we continue to get them to come back. But I do feel like it's not like they're turning up once and never turning up again. They do turn up. It just seems to be a slightly less frequent basis than we see in our female participants.
And then going to the final question around the provision of the sites and location. We are increasing our provision within the West. We know there are certain pockets that of need in those areas, and we've got a few great providers. What we find hard sometimes is the actual providers that we engage in, because as well as some funding, we are relying on actual providers that are able to deliver in various areas. One of the key schools that we work with is Watersmith School. I know that's not that close, not that far, but it's but yeah, we are constantly, due to how the program has been increased, the awareness of the program has increased over the year, we are having more providers come into us, and so we can be a little bit more actually picky and choosy with the providers that we use. And if we can find locations that we can use in those areas, we are working well and trying to work more with our schools for schools provision. It's a little bit harder than we anticipated. Initially, when the program first came up, we were dealing with COVID, and a lot of the schools were really quite adamant not delivery. We've had more schools engaged this year, and we're hoping that will continue to increase as they see the benefits of the program and their delivery. Sometimes it comes down to staffing and their actual delivery aspects, but what we do, we engage with the head teachers meetings and hopefully get the champions of those schools that do deliver to kind of raise the awareness and say, look, it is a great program. So hopefully as we move forward and we increase more providers and we work closely with more schools, we are able to pick up and make sure we are targeting those provisions that would seem like we haven't got delivery there at the present moment. And we'll take on point your point around private rented accommodation and see what data performance team might be able to share with us and see what the mapping of that is, and see if we can if we are currently targeting them, or if there's areas that we are not targeting.
Thanks, Erica. Perhaps I can just send you yourself and Daniel an email, because I can pick up some of the points in that, and we could perhaps explore them a little bit.
No problem. Shall I put an email address in the chat?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Jameson got a question. Then before Sue, I take you. Yvonne, did you have a question as well? You raised something in the pre-meet. Do you want to ask that question now? Okay. Sue, then Yvonne.
Daniel, you said the dance part of the programme took part of the engine rooms. Now I know 3 engine rooms in Haringey. One is a cafe on the Walthamstow wetlands, but it's Haringey. And then there's another on the estate very nearby, and then there's one in Muswell Hill, effectively. Which engine room was it?
The one on Tottenham Hale Estate.
On the Tottenham Hale Estate. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yvonne?
I'd like to make a comment. I have put in a complaint to the organisers of the football that was supposed to be taking place in Chestnuts Park over the holidays. I took my young child round there, my grandson, at 2 o'clock when it was supposed 2 o'clock when it was supposed to start. Nobody turned up Monday and Tuesday, but I did get a phone call to say that one of the boys had said that the football was on to go round there. And this was at 4 o'clock. Secondly, I took him round on the Wednesday myself, and I spoke to the chap that was sitting there, one of the youth leaders, and he said, oh, we can't start yet because I'm waiting for the leader of the group to come with the footballs. So I said, but it's supposed to start at 2. Why are we having to wait around so long? So he said, well, I can't do nothing till he comes. So what I did was I went round to Chestnuts Park to the community centre and spoke to the people in there. It was nothing to do with them anyway, but they said they'd had several people come in and complain. Now, what I want to know is, if you're going to put on a programme for children in the park at a certain time, surely your workers should turn up on time and be polite. But it turns out, because so many of the youngsters that had come on the Monday and Tuesday had gone home, some of them on the Wednesday while I was waiting there went home. And secondly, when they did all come, they were all older teenagers. And, you know, I don't expect to go round there and take a child round there, building his hopes out. I even took him down to buy a Spurs outfit because that's what he really wanted. And unfortunately, nothing happened. Fortunately, when I did go down to Spurs to get the football kit, the people in there were so obliging. They took him round to the football pitch, let him have a little kick round there, and then they took some photographs of him. Now, to him, that was something better. But at the end of the day, when you say you're putting on these programs, they need to be put on time and with the right equipment. If you can't do that, then don't advertise it, because so many children were disappointed those 3 days. If I hadn't have stayed on Wednesday with him, I wouldn't have been able to have told you anything about this. Now, if you're going to employ people to do a job and they're getting paid for it, and you're paying £100 a session, then you need to make sure that those people are there on time so the children are not disappointed and the parents don't have to complain. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Yvonne. I suppose that's more that in terms of it's not a question, it's more like Yvonne is sharing her experience of, like, you know, some activities not having happened because of staff shortages or staff not being there on time. My question is, in terms of what oversight do we have, like in terms of what is in place to make sure that all the activities are happening according to the plan? And, you know, it's like, and obviously if they're not, then right kind of actions have been taken.
Yeah, I think I'll answer this, Erica. So from first off, we try and make sure all our providers know what's sort of expected to them before the summer holidays, and we do have a provider meeting, and it does cover those basics around sort of make sure you turn up on time, make sure you've got the equipment, make sure again that sort of friendly, inclusive environment is created. I can only apologise about sort of experience. It wasn't something I was aware of, I'll be honest. But I'm pretty sure I know which group we're on about. I think it's the two-touch rules on the Muga there. So it's something I can go back and talk to them around. And maybe some stuff we can put in place around sort of making sure that, for example, maybe speaking to, again, Chestnuts Community Centre and asking if we could leave some equipment there. So in the case of if the lead coach is late for whatever reason, there is some equipment that they can use. So I'll speak to TR, who are the organisation who run it. One, to sort of remind them, like, again, of what their sort of responsibilities are as a provider and an extension of Haringey Council and the Haringey Council delivery. And the other side of things is we during the summer holidays, we can't get around to every session, but we do carry out monitoring visits. So we'll turn up during sessions unannounced, just to get a good understanding of, okay, are sessions being delivered in a professional manner? Do they conduct themselves in the way we should expect them to? Again, making sure that what they're saying is going on. This is obviously one of the ones that we missed on those days. But we do myself and the wider team go round during the summer holidays and carry out the monitoring visits and complete our monitoring form. And I guess sort of going forward, one thing we will do is maybe just increase that monitoring on that organisation over the next few holidays, just to ensure that this isn't maybe it was just a bad summer or maybe a bad couple of weeks, and hopefully it's something that's not going to continue.
Great. Thank you very much to both of you for presenting that report, and we look forward to hear from you next year in our summer program or thank you very much for your time, Erica and Daniel. Item 10 is introduction, Hazelmere Children's Residential Home. So it's one of council's own residential home. Beverly Henrik is going to present to us, like, what's the development with the children home, residential children home, when is it likely to open, and what is it costing us, and what's the advantage, and I'm sure there's lots of positive things about it. Beverly, I was going to ask you, can we just stick to like literally our 5 minutes, then there will be some question and recommendation from the panels, from the panel members, and because we are already kind of using lots of time. Thank you.
Not a problem. So the report is been distributed in the pack.
We can't hear you. Sorry, Beverly. You need to do that magical thing with your mic again. Yeah.
I'm hoping this is clearer.
Yes, we can hear you better. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So the report that's in the pack just is for noting tonight, and happy to take any questions that members would find helpful to discuss about a very exciting opportunity for the service to move towards owning and delivering our own children's home after many, many years in Haringey. Some of you will know the history of Hazelmere, that it was originally a respite care centre for children with disabilities. It closed in 2015, and in 2019, at the beginning of 2020, we asked to have access to the building and started a programme of extensive refurbishments, from building back floors to ceilings, and just ensuring that the building was fit for purpose for what is now its intended use as a residential children's home. We've set out in the paper before you our delivery model, that we will support children through the AMBIT approach. We have a core team, a small core team of workers who have been trained up and are supported by an operational group. We will, after Ofsted gives us our certificate of use, and we are formally registered, at the end of November, move towards completing our recruitment campaign, and in January the 9th is the date that we have set to admit our first young person. I mean, this is something that we have, it's been a long journey for Haringey. We've been very well supported along the way by members with the community engagement of residents and sharing ideas and learning, so that we ensure from all arenas with our partners and other professionals and members that we've developed a model that we hope children will feel loved, cared for and nurtured in Hazelmere's residential children's home. So if the model is predicated upon us being able to work closely with another local authority, and we will have measures in place around matching children and working them where, as far as is possible, to be rehabilitated into community settings and away from residential settings. So that's our overall objectives. There is, of course, a statement of purpose and a plethora of documents to get us through over the Ofsted line. And I am pleased that on their visit with us in last month, that they gave us a clear indication that they are coming back to register us for operational delivery from whatever date we set, and that date is now the 9th of January. Happy to take any questions. I think the report, however brief, does set out the key issues that members were asking questions about.
Yep, thank you for that, Beverly. Just like a couple of really quick questions from myself before I ask anyone else if they've got any question. What's the capacity of the residential home? How many beds or how many rooms or how many people could it accommodate, young people? Secondly, my understanding that obviously it's going to open on 9th of January. So we're actually expecting to, in a couple of months' time, to open it. Second, last question, is it going to be catering like for the needs of the complex needs individual that we often have to send it to out of borough, which is obviously not practical for the families, as well as in terms of the cost implication as well. So these are my quick kind of question. Anyone else want to comment or have a question? Yes. Okay, that's fine. And obviously I was going to, also mention that it's very, very positive that we are obviously investing in borough kind of residential homes, which is a really good move. And this committee will, I'm sure, we wholeheartedly support this, and we will be looking forward to hear about the progress of Hazelmere in future as well. Yvonne, did you put your hands up as well? Yes, Yvonne got a question as well.
Is it the building of the old Wesley School?
No, councillor, it is not.
It isn't. I was going to say, because if it was, you could get in touch with Chaz and Dave, because they were the benefactors of the other school, and I'm sure you could have done a deal with them.
Okay, Beverly, you can, I mean, obviously my understanding is that it was a children's respite home to begin with anyway. Right, so yes. It was closed, and now we are kind of investing and reopening so that we could provide in borough residential support for young people and children. Okay, yeah, Beverly, you may come.
Thanks so much. So the Hazelmere Children's Home is a 6-bed home. It's a very large house in the Crouch End area. Our statement of purpose is will look to work with children between the ages of 11 up to their 16th birthday. And the plan under the AMBIT delivery model is to ensure that we work very intensely with their professional network locally, and where it's safe to do so, with their families, to see if we can reunify. What we know from our data is that a lot of children, as they mature into becoming care leavers, eventually want to return home. This is our opportunity to test through the rich local resource that's been developed over the last 3 or 4 years, to give them the chance to do so only where it is evidence that it is safe. If it's not, then we will be working with our in-house foster carers through the Mockingbird scheme to step them out of the residential unit to form relationships with foster carers and the families within. Really important for us, learning from our experiences of care leavers across the country, to ensure that we have developed some lifelong links for looked after children, and so that their sense of belonging that never really goes away, the need to belong, the need to be recognised, the need to be loved, the need to be part of the community and the family, that the set up at Hazelmere, that we foster that very deep, and some young people describe it to me as spiritual need, and so we do hope that some of the culture and the principles that we want to deliver will be achieved for children with social, emotional and mental health support needs, I think was your last question, Councillor.
Yeah, so I was trying to clarify the types of children that would be using the home, because I probably just assumed it was going to be SEND children, but it's not. It's children that have been in care.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Anna, did you have a question as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay, Anna.
I wanted to understand, how long do you envisage the average stay at Hazelmere would be, and how long do you think it would take to match a child with a foster carer, or take a decision on whether they should be reunited with their family members?
Thank you. Really helpful question for me to help to clarify. So the AMBIT approach is one we've adopted, and it has a time frame of between 6 and 9 months. Within the first 3 months, we will have a clear indication as to the placement type. And members, we have invested our work with the Anna Freud Centre and deployed the Berry, what's called the Berry. It's a psychological tool that really helps professionals to determine what placement type over time will be best for a young person, given the trauma that they've experienced previously. So the Berry will be completed within the first month of their placement, and then we will go on through the AMBIT approach to build the professionals right for the child, family or the foster carer, that will do some intensive work to ensure that the next move for our young person offers a longer longevity of placement stability. Really key to the way that we want to work, and is a model that isn't currently effectively rolled out elsewhere. We don't want to perpetuate warehouses. We want greenhouse types of approaches for our children, and really want to welcome them back into their Haringey community safely. 6 to 9 months is the short answer. Forgive my long answer.
Great, thank you very much. I think Sue wants to come back again. Sue?
So you said it's a 6-bedroom place, and again, my assumptions would be that each child would have their own room. But my worries about places is they get oversubscribed, and then you end up having more children. You can't. You absolute limit of 6. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Ofsted registration and the regulatory framework is non-negotiable. Every looked after child must have their own bedroom. We are not allowed to go over the prescribed registration numbers, which will be 6. And to do so will render the whole placement illegal. I can assure you that we are not in the business of going against regulatory frameworks, and so each child will have a dedicated space, and we will not be overcrowding. As part of our commissioning strategy, we are working on other internal options. The next home that we have some vision and ambitions for is called the Heart. And in the Heart home, we will look to reduce our reliance on external placements, residential placements 20 miles out of Haringey, and try and bring as many of our children who with social, emotional, mental health support needs back into the borough where it's safe to do so.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that, Beverly. It's really useful, and as I said earlier, this committee welcomed this news, and we look forward to hear more about it after January, you know, just to like in terms of the progress and how it's how it's been utilized, this new space. And if no further question.
Sorry, Macbully, do you mind if I just jump in very, very, very quickly? I know it's late.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see your hand, Mary.
It's okay.
You wanted to ask. Yeah, just
no worries.
Please
at all.
be brief because
I
we
will
are.
be very brief, I promise. Okay. Beverly, thanks a lot for that, and it's really interesting. I've worked quite a lot with this age group, with children with social, emotional, mental health support needs, and 6 to 9 months seems really, really short. I'm sure you've similarly worked with that group. And I know what you're talking about is doing assessments, but I would ask if we could have a report back on after the first, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months or something, to see how that is going, because it just feels like that's a very quick turnaround for children. But maybe if we could get a report back so that we can so that we can see how it's going and get some kind of an assessment of how things are. Thank you.
Councillor Mason, it'll be our pleasure to come back.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that. If no more questions or contribution, I will be closing this item. Thank you very much once again, Beverly. Sorry, the next item is the work program update, and for that I will bring Rob in to update the committee about what we will be taking for on in terms of the work program. Thanks.
Thank you. Since the last meeting, we've had the Scrutiny Cafe, which was on the 16th of September at the Selby Centre, and proved to be very well attended, including a number of young people, and it went very well, and we got lots of good feedback from it. All the feedback's been put together in one of the documents that's attached to the report, together with the priorities identified in the scrutiny survey and other issues that have already been flagged up by the panel. There are a number of ways of approaching the issues that have been flagged up. They can be the subject of an in-depth review, they can be one-off items at future panel meetings, or they can be just questions for the cabinet member. I think at this time, probably the top priority is selecting which particular issues you want to do an in-depth review on. It's not compulsory, but it's things that most scrutiny bodies tend to do every year. What I would say is it's already November, and it would be best if any review that was started now was completed by the end of the year for the sake of continuity. So there's probably slightly less time available to do whatever you choose to start off with, and there will be perhaps next year and the year after. Anyway, there was an informal meeting of the panel a couple of weeks ago, and 3 issues were flagged up as potential reviews. These were leisure and recreational activities for children and young people, housing and children, and listening to children and young people. Each of these will need to be subject to detailed scoping and for terms of reference to be put together. So as things stand, leisure and recreational activities will be the first one, housing second, and listening to children and young people will be the third one. I would just say that this work plan isn't just for this year, it's for next year as well. So we've got 18 months to do those in, and yeah, so there is a bit of time, although, as I say, best if the first one was completed by the end of this year. In terms of the next meeting of the panel, which is on the 3rd of January, that's the next scheduled meeting. There are a number of items already flagged up for that. Budget scrutiny, the medium-term financial strategy. We will be arranging a briefing session for members of the panel ahead of that, so you have an understanding of how it works. Secondly, the Haringey Safety Valve programme. Thirdly, the exam and test results for this year. That's the GCSE results, SATs and all the others. And an update on the implementation of the recommendation of the Haringey family of schools, the review that was taken, I think it was a couple of years ago. One thing I should say is the number of items we have on that agenda is kind of dependent on how the budget scrutiny process turns out, because if there's a lot of proposals in there, they might not be space to accommodate all of that. But as things stand, that is the plan at the moment. One other thing to flag up is the panel wanted a joint meeting with the adults panel on transitions, and that's been arranged for the 9th of February. And one final thing, the meeting on the 20th of March, there's a clash on the 20th of March with Alexandra Park and Palace Board, so we've been asked if we can move that date. So I'm proposing that we move that back 3 days to Thursday the 23rd when there aren't any clashes. I'll leave it at that. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much for that, Rob. Yeah, I mean, we've got obviously a packed agenda for our next 3 meetings, but obviously whatever the sort of review project that we will undertake needs to be finished by 20th of March or 23rd of March by our last meeting, so that then we can submit it to the overview and scrutiny. So we don't have a huge amount of time. I just wanted to ask members and if they've got any comments or contribution about the work plan, about any of the updates from Rob. Yeah, Lords?
I was just wondering, with listening to children and young people, whether we could link in there the whole idea of a youth council. And apparently Haringey used to have one that was very proactive some years ago. I think it'd be really, really good if we reconsidered how we could launch something, because they're very successful in places like Islington. And it does fit into listening to children and young people.
Definitely, great. That's a really good recommendation. Thank you for that, Lords. We'll definitely include it. Any more comments? And okay, item 14. Thank you very much for that, everyone. Item 14. my understanding is that two of our co-opted members, Anita Jakarta and Kanupuria, as last meeting this meeting before they basically their both parents governors represent us. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank both Anita and Kanupriya for their incredible contribution to the work of this panel. And we wish you all the best, but you will be missed. Like, thank you very much for everything you did for our children in Haringey. Thank you. And yeah, this is the end of the meetings. I also want to take this opportunity to thank members, co-opted members, and Councillor Brabazon for being here and answering our question, to Rob and everyone else who made this meeting happen. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.